Don's headed with me and Johnny this morning, so I'll let him drive today. And I'll guess since he's not out here already, I'll have to open my own door. Good morning, Ruby, from the other side of the car. Well, there's a little bit of color out there this morning. We've got one more fairly warm day before it gets a little cooler here. As in, just a little cooler here. There's Donnie. I told him to just put the car in park and I'll handle the doors this morning.
Car's in park.
All right, door is open. Trunk is open. Have a great day, buddy. I'll see you this afternoon. I think you and I are headed to Whole Foods.
Yay.
That's what I thought you would say. Mom loves you. Have a great day, bud.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye-bye, bud. Probably to get that.
The sunrise wasn't really super pretty this morning, but boy, that glow off the downtown building sure is. I love that view. Don and I are headed to the Triangle Smart City Summit this morning. We've been to this before. It's run by Triangle J Council. And I wanted to show you something new we learned about items on your calendar. So, obviously, Don and I both had added it to our calendar. And we put in the location here. So, Triangle J Council. And when I click on that, I'm going to be able to say, I guess, open in Google Maps. Which may not do what I wanted it to do. I mean, I'm sure now that it's open in Google Maps, I can send it to the car. Share to Ruby, and it's coming up over here. So it starts at 9. This usually grows on the way to RTP because traffic's building. They are serving breakfast, so I think being there a few minutes early to get a bagel is okay too. So that was pretty easy from my phone, but Don says on Android it's a bit different, so I'm going to cancel the navigation. And what's going on your phone?
Well, when I click the calendar entry and I click the location, what it did it this time because I'd already went in there. It popped up like the share window, and one of the places I could send it to was Google Maps, Tesla, and the third thing, I don't remember what it was.
Huh.
So I believe I could have tapped the Tesla logo, and it would have sent it to the Tesla app, which I guess would have sent it to the car.
Don and I were thinking that when we clicked on the calendar entry, it was just supposed to go to the car without Google Maps in the center. Now, it opening up Google Maps and then clicking the share button is one extra step, but it's really fast, so I don't think that's a bad thing. Don had actually tried it out on his phone one time, and it did pop up the Tesla app over on calendar. But he's tried to do it a couple times since then. He even closed the calendar and the Google Maps, and it didn't go back to prompting him straight to the car. So we're not sure what caused that, but you might try it and you might find it just asks you if you want to go to the car. I never record this when I'm over here because it's under construction and it's crowded and there's lots of traffic and it's just a gigantic mess, but they've made really great progress. Oh, there's a Fuquay cop in Raleigh.
Bear right onto US 70 West, North Carolina 50.
Yeah, I turned on her talking for Don so that he could get through these couple of turns, but at any point they've made really great progress putting in the new bridge up here. We're actually going
now
over the new
right
bridge.
US 70 West.
It was quite the old antiquated bridge before. Definitely needed a refresh. This is the main crossover to get out of downtown and go over to Glenwood Avenue. Highway 70.
In 1,000 feet, bear left to stay on Wade Avenue.
I like to avoid this area when possible, but it seems like several times a month I have to cut over to Glenwood and have to come down that way anyway. Ruby's got a nice safe corner parking spot and we're here. We've never been here before, but we're here now. We're here in plenty of time. Don's got his bagel and his front row seat.
Front row seat.
So Don and I just came out of the J Council Government Smart City Summit that was held this morning.
Yep.
There were 3 groups of speakers and presentations.
Yep.
Well, the first one had 2 guys, and then each of the subsequent ones had 1 person speaking. The first one was the town of Cary, North Carolina, which is a large city here in the central North Carolina in the triangle, Raleigh, Durham, Cary, and they'll say Chapel Hill, Durham. Their presentation was really interesting. They were talking about what smart city technologies they are using today to manage transportation and traffic, and I guess to some extent town infrastructure. So I took notes. We're just kind of, Don and I, a little informal chit chat here before we forget, before we pull away. They have fiber to almost all of their traffic signals. I said I think there's 1 traffic signal that doesn't currently have fiber.
Yeah, I think he said there's over 200 traffic signals, and all but 1 of them has fiber optic communications.
And having that allows them to move data around pretty quick, and to share the data that's coming in from the traffic signals with their monitoring infrastructure that they have. I believe he also said they have as many or more CCTVs in Cary than any other city in North Carolina. And he put up a map and he showed lots of red dots of a small section of where the traffic monitoring, sidewalk monitoring, street monitoring is. So there are a lot of cameras in Cary. 2/3 of their intersections have a closed circuit TV camera. And they're all HD.
Right, they're all HD.
Yeah, they're all HD, high quality.
Pan and zoom and all that type of stuff. And they even have them in places where you wouldn't expect, like the entrance to the park.
To utilize park utilization.
Right.
Yep. So they're big on cameras in Cary. They have connected school zone flashers. That's something that I never thought about. So if the school lets out early due to weather, okay, and they know instead of getting out, Johnny's school gets out at 2:10, that they're getting out at 12:10.
Right.
They can send a signal to the school flasher for that school and have it start flashing that it's school speed limits right now. They used to have somebody go around and they would manually, he said, flip the flasher to, we're letting out early, you need to be on now. So imagine how resource intensive that was, and plus you can't turn them all at the exact same time because you don't have that many people. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, they were looking at technologies, and I guess it doesn't exist now, but coming, that if emergency personnel needs to respond to an accident and they need to go down streets X, Y, and Z, that they can change the traffic signals to give priority to the emergency response. And then they were also hoping to have some technology possibly on drivers' cell phones or in the car that would send signals to drivers to let them know that there's an emergency vehicle coming up behind them, or that they should move over at the lights fixing to change to give priority to an emergency vehicle. But I don't think that was there today. I think that was just stuff they were thinking of doing more.
Right.
So,
well, they have a control center that's manned, that's monitoring all these cameras, but it apparently is not. It's basically manned during prime shift. It didn't sound like it was manned around the clock, but they do hope to expand it, and they're using quite a bit of software to do analytics. They're really gathering the data and then running it through analytics to come up with ways to utilize the data and make things more effective. It isn't so much real time, but they do obviously are looking towards that. They did get into the fact that technology is changing. The communication technology that a couple 5 years ago was being talked about for vehicle to car, vehicle to infrastructure, DSC or DMC, it's actually kind of being replaced. And Carrie is not trying to pick a particular technology. They're just trying to come up with the solution or utilizing that data itself. How and what type of technology collected it. They're not really they're trying to be technology as agnostic, because apparently I would say they were very pro the cell phone. In other words, they were talking about some of the sensors they have now. They have to buy the sensor for the intersection. Then they have to buy the sensor and put in a city vehicle or put in some private citizen's vehicle. And then as that vehicle drives around, it can send timing data to the intersection that, how long it took to travel. Well, obviously, the gentleman said that, there's 143,000 cell phones walking around in people's cars, pockets, purses. And monitoring those cell phones or using cell phone based application would be basically overnight. They could have 100,000 times more than they've already got, and it would cost the incremental cost would be nothing. So I agree with him that I think the cell phone based solutions. He did talk about the Wi-Fi that as you drive around. Various different sensors. He talked about one particular road, Davis Drive, which I used to drive, has Wi-Fi sensors. But what happens is when you come by, your phone is, of course, scanning for Wi-Fi hotspots to connect to, right? That's what your phone does. It tries to use Wi-Fi and not the cell phone data. Well, that process goes by and they can get your MAC address, and then they can basically, at that point, they know that a cell phone passed this spot along the side of the road, and they just put these sensors, these Wi-Fi sensors all along this road, and they can have very accurate data with the volumes of cars or cell phones, I guess, that's went through there and how long it takes to traverse that road. Flow into an intersection and out of intersection. I think that was pretty slick. But Cary is one of the, what do you call that? Kind of upperly mobile type areas. Wake County in general is, but Cary would be the leading upperly mobile area city. They're very environmentally conscious. They have a lot of regulations. You can only have a sign that's about 2 inches by 4 inches for your business. They have a lot of standards that you have to live up to and carry. So they're very into all of this, which I think is a good thing.
One of the other things I took notes on was that they have a parking lot at their town offices, a parking lot.
This was good.
And they have put a sensor in each parking space. So at a computer screen in their monitoring center, they can tell how many spaces actually have somebody parked in them and how many are empty. So they might be able to go out and put a lot closed sign up, go down to, street XYZ to the other lot, this one's full. I suppose having automated sign would come next after understanding the need for a sign, but that's not there yet. And then I know everyone out there driving an electric vehicle will be interested. They do have some electric car chargers in that parking lot. And so not only are they now able to tell, yes, we have somebody utilizing the charger as a charger in that space, but now they can tell when they're being iced out, either by an EV that's not plugged in or by a vehicle that doesn't need to charge. So that really piqued my interest there, that they would be able to tell that. They were interested in utilization numbers, so hopefully they're being used enough that they'll feel the need to even add even more. But they want to make sure they're used by the right set of cars. So
right.
that was pretty cool.
Yeah, he inferred quite clearly that the intent of this is, if this gets to be a problem, they now have the data, or they have the mechanism where they can detect that this is occurring and take some type of action.
Yeah. They talked about making use of city vehicles that are already on the streets of detecting problems for the city. And they specifically mentioned buses that travel the same route every day, detecting potholes and being able to report that back, instead of relying on, like we have in Wake County or North Carolina NCDOT, we have an 800 number we can call to report a pothole in our road. And around here, it actually does get fixed pretty quick. And most pretty much all months out of the year, they can find a day when they can go do that. But I guess, better for the public if it's detected immediately by a bus and somebody sent out to fix it the same day or the next day.
Be cool.
That would be even better. They showed a diagram of a future street layout, and it was a one-way street that had 2 lanes of traffic going forward into the screen. It had what's a bus-only route?
Yeah, had a bus lane.
BRT, I think it was called.
Yeah.
And
Bus Rapid Transit.
And then off to the side behind, like a barricade, even a small little barricade, was a bike lane. And then it had the traditional sidewalks and street crossing signs for pedestrians and people crossing, and businesses on the side. And this is about when Don stuck up his hand and asked, but what about scooters and people on electric unicycles and longboards and, modes of, they called it micro transportation other than bikes. Like, where are you thinking that? And then later on, the guy also mentioned, like, that diagram doesn't show a pickup and drop off for Uber and Lyft drivers, or for loading and unloading for autonomous vehicles. So I guess, to me, it pretty much looks like a street in downtown Raleigh today is what that diagram looked like, more so maybe than what my future street might look like. But
right. Well, I think the picture was trying to explain that what a smart city and what these types of technology, how it can kind of transform that street, like parking sensors to let you know that there's street parking. There's places to park along that street. That there are places where people can sortie in and out of an Uber. The bus is arriving or will depart, and where's it going, and how many people are waiting for the bus. Pedestrians are crossing the street, and cars that are approaching that intersection where the pedestrians are crossing, they'll be notified. So all these types of things that can be leveraged when you have communications between the street and the car, and people and the street, and the bus and the street, and all these things, and how that flow of data, and it is mostly cell phone type data, would leverage that. My question was, which Marianne talked about, which kind of gets me back on my soapbox, try not to do that. I've commented that regulators are really stuck with their grandpa's ideas of, the only way you can move people is via trains or something like that. This bicycle is an example. I guess the city officials will fight tooth and nail for bike lanes, but yet they'll absolutely write you a ticket, throw you in jail if you ride your scooter in these lanes. And I'm sitting here and I asked the very specific question: why the bias towards bicycles? If bicycle lanes really are to get people out of their cars. And if your goal is to get people out of their cars, then electric scooters and other types of transportation that could utilize the bike lanes, why don't you encourage that? Because granted, ideally, bicycles give you great health benefits, but really if you get the car and the exhaust out of the thing, that's a health benefit too. It isn't as good as a bike rider, but you know, if you can get people,
still sunshine, vitamin D, you know,
yeah, out of the car,
hopefully out of the car, some little bit of fresh air.
And the truth of the matter is, you know, most road bikes, if you go look at these bikes that people ride to and from work, they're very expensive. Well, you can buy an electric scooter for $400 now. And so there is no difference, in my opinion, in trying to find a place for my personally owned bike or my personally owned scooter. Let me put my scooter in the bike rack. So I don't quite understand why cities are diametrically opposed to new forms of mobility. You know, that they just are in love with these bike lanes, and it gets me back to my point. I think they're just thinking with 1920 thought processes in 1950s maybe with the bicycles, and they just cannot let go of the fact that if people were going to ride bicycles to work and school, they already be doing it. I mean, yeah, you can put bike lanes in and that will increase it a little bit. But if you really want to ride your bicycle in North Carolina, you know, one August afternoon when it's 95 degrees out there, baking hot and humid, you're not going to want to ride your bicycle, you know, but jumping up on an electric scooter, buzzing along at, you know, 10, 12 miles an hour, no big deal going up that hill. And so I just, you know, and the guy that said Kerry is looking into that. You know, they didn't absolutely say, well, you know, we'll fall on our sword and die for bicycles, and you'll fight to the last breath against the mobility electric scooters. So they were a little open about it.
Right. Well, I really liked the guys from the town of Cary. Their presentation was interesting. They were very knowledgeable. My only suggestion for them about their slides, let's not call the micro transport, the scooters and the unicycles and the longboards and stuff, these other electronic battery operated modes of transportation, let's not call them a disruptor, because that was what the slide, I mean, I guess from a planning point of view, it is a disruption.
Yeah.
But maybe, you know, if you're saying let's embrace these other modes and figure out how to work with them, maybe a different word for that slide. But the guy said that they have about 36 bird scooters in the town of Cary. They have an app that lets them monitor. I think they trickle over from Raleigh. And that the main people using them are town of Cary employees. So I think they may actually be sort of popular with some of the local transportation guys, but haven't been embraced by the citizens of Cary at this point yet. They were,
Yeah, well, you know, not to get sidetracked here, but I think if Cary came up with a program about private scooter use, saying, you know, we're going to allow people to, you know, ride scooters in the bike lanes and park in the city bike racks, your scooter, you're going to be allowed to do that. I think you know, I get that the utilization of scooter companies is certainly a solution, but I also feel like you know, people who buy their own scooter will take care of it, be less likely to kill themselves on it, and won't leave it laying around places. So I would think if I was a city, I would resist right now the public or shared scooter concept, and I would try to embrace private ownership of scooters, even though ideally long term that may not be the end result. You want all scooters, but I would just say, you know, if you're willing to go out of your way as a city to encourage bicycle riding, I would say please go out of your way to encourage electric scooter or unicycle, or, you know, maybe even skateboards. I mean, if you want to break your neck, I think you're making that decision as an individual. And I would tell you that your chances of getting ran over by a car on a scooter are probably equal to a bicycle. Maybe a skateboard truly is more dangerous, or a unicycle, but I wish the guys would have gave me a more hard and fast answer, like, we've made our decision, we're never going to allow scooters. I could deal with that. Or it's that, you know, we see these things as real disruptors, and we're going to jump on that and try to get people out of their cars, and we're going to get those bike lanes that have 1 bike a day in them, we're going to get 1,000 scooters a day in them. You know, I could take it either way.
Just 2 more quick points on the Town of Cary presentation. They do have all LED street lights now since 2015. And they mentioned that an obstacle to doing more things with the street lights, like putting additional sensors or cameras or whatever on the street poles, is that Duke Energy Progress owns them. They said they have talked with other towns that actually own their own street lights, and they have a lot more flexibility. That trying to work with Duke has been challenging, I think is the word that they used or wanted to use. And the other thing was pavement temperature sensors. So, you know, tomorrow morning we're facing a situation where they're saying we're going to have here in Raleigh, we're going to have a flash freeze overnight. We're going to have some rain between like 6 and 10 p.m. and it's going to be in the 50s when the rain comes down, and it's going to be a little windy, so hopefully it'll dry off the rain. But then by the time we wake up in the morning, it's going to be below freezing. It's going to, between, I guess, midnight and 6 a.m., it's going to drop, the bottom fall out. Well, do we have black ice on the pavement or not? Do we need to worry about our bridges and overpasses? You know, there's some treatment down on the roads, but do we need to send out the salt trucks? Well, if we had temperature sensors in the pavement, we would know where the pavement was at or below freezing, and it would give us a better idea of how dangerous the asphalt. And you know, in Raleigh, that's what we get. We get black ice. We don't get large accumulations of snow typically, and a lot of times when we do get snow, it's a mix. And so black ice is you know, instead of driving on 2 or 3 inches of snow, which is, you know, maybe some mountain or up north places, we're driving on a 1/4 inch of ice sometimes. So I think that would be a good investment for areas in the south that are prone to ice buildup on the roadway, like we are.
Yep.
So the second person that we had the pleasure of listening to was a gentleman from AT&T, and I would say he was upper level sales. Yeah, his presentation was more of a broader city's perspective and a little bit of what AT&T has to offer, and how he felt it was very important. And I agree with him that the data that you collect for street transportation be tied into your public safety department, that the data would scale both vertically and horizontally, that all of the systems would network or talk to each other. Again, back to that example of the firemen and policemen need to respond to an accident. Well, they're using your traffic data to make sure they get to the accident site safely, and that all of the other cars on the road at the same time are safe. So, you know, you just gave a few examples of how the data being all available to all the systems was a useful thing.
Yeah, basically what Marion said is he tried to stress how important it is when you're trying to deploy some type of digital solution to a problem, that it is absolutely imperative that you do not build silos. In other words, you don't let the police department go off and build their system, and then let the sanitation department go off and build their solution, and then let the 911 people build their solution, and then the city inspectors build their solution. And then after all these people build all their siloed solutions, then you sit down as the mayor and say, but I want to, the police department wants to look at the fire data, or the sanitation people need to know what the school...
it's a safety issue if there are trash cans that are in the street that haven't been picked up. Right. It's a safety issue if storm drains are flooding. It's, you know, they really are much more interconnected than you would think at a surface level. He just warned that
don't do that. Start with the end in mind, that you want all this to be integrated. So as you are looking to do a digital solution, you're asking, how is this digital solution going to get shared by my peer departments? And as you know, just like everywhere, cities suffer from that, this is my turf and turf wars. And as a city, you need to really avoid that type of thinking. It's been done before, and he talked about several cities and solutions that have put in at great expense. 5 years later, they threw it all in the trash can and start all over again. So don't waste your time. At least start with the end in mind. So that was probably the most important thing. He did talk about Chapel Hill is a spot city where AT&T and Hitachi have worked.
I believe it was SPAT.
Well, okay. Have worked with Chapel Hill, along with I think he said there was 10 cities nationwide, Atlanta, Dallas. Chapel Hill sounded kind of like outside the norm, but he was talking about gunshot sensors, where if the sensors detect gunshots, that all the street lights in the area and will turn on bright, and all the traffic cameras will start scanning and panning. Those types of things are what they're doing. He shared that Chapel Hill people have automated crosswalks. When you walk up to an intersection, the lights turn to let the pedestrian cross, start flashing. They don't use the button anymore, like you used to use the walk up and push the button and wait a little bit and then you get to cross the street. Well, now they're automating that in Chapel Hill.
Right. They showed a picture of the video that looked like the same kind of picture Electrek showed for autopilot. Where they were developing the technology to take the video pointing at the street corner and picking the cars out of the video and picking the people out of the video and making decisions based on that. And it just looked like the hacker of autopilot, when they Electrek showed these pictures of what autopilot sees, that's what it looked like. Yeah.
And Chapel Hill is just one of the places, and they did talk about parking sensors that if you go into the downtown part of Chapel Hill, this AT&T's and Hitachi solution basically will help you find a parking place.
Yeah, he was also really big on talking about drones. He said by 2022, drones are going to be like gnats, that they are going to, commercial drones are going to increase 400%. That people had better be ready for it, that the Amazon fulfillment center in Raleigh is going to be every day sending hundreds of drones out of there to deliver packages in the Triangle area. And all these cities need to take that into account when they're doing their planning.
Well, and they've talked about that even in Raleigh. Wake Med has a drone system that they're deploying right now that will move medicine from one part of the facility to another, and also labs, specimens and stuff. In other words, the lab is, on the other side of the campus, and it can take quite a while to get a specimen from where it was taken in a hospital room to the lab for, that logistics is time consuming. And now they're talking about using drones to quickly move that from, one end of the campus to the end of the campus where the lab is. And I thought that was pretty cool. And they're doing that as we speak.
And he also talked a little bit about the digital divide in rural communities versus urban areas, which is sort of, I would say, a hot button for you, or something that Don has mentioned a good bit. He mentioned it yesterday as far as charging stations. There's no charging stations in rural places, but this all can continue to be built up in the larger metropolitan areas with this Electrify America. But what he was saying is that what happens is AT&T wants to go into a smaller, less economically robust city, and then the city sees it as a profit center. So they want to put fiber in the city. They want to work with the city to put fiber, but the city wants to make money off of the right-of-ways to put the fiber in, so they hike up the cost for AT&T to try to put in the fiber, and they have trouble meeting in the middle and something that allows AT&T to make a profit because they are a business, versus we really want to give this town higher speed connectivity. So he said in some places they've just sort of give up on putting in fiber, and they're just going to put stuff on the try to put stuff on the
cell phone.
Yeah, cell phone stuff on the street posts to try to bring additional connectivity to these cities, because there was too many roadblocks to putting underground cables into laying fiber.
Basically, that was a different point of view that I hadn't thought about, but I was somewhat aware. But he basically said point blank that when cities hear AT&T's coming in and they want to put fiber in, they immediately run and jack up their permit fees and their inspection fees and all these other fees to get their cut. And
me personally, I'd be going.
It changes it from economically something that could, might work to basically it's a showstopper. And he says that's what's happening, and that the cell technology, and he kind of poo-pooed 5G, but he
well, only in the time to deploy. If somebody tells you it's going to be here in 6 months, he said it's no way.
Right. But he stressed the fact that their AT&T's LTE solution, which is a private network. I mean, LTE is a common technology, but he stressed that basically if you're a municipality, AT&T will come in and install for your use exclusively, not anybody else, your own LTE network. So they'll come in, I guess, and put in a couple cell towers in your town that your various different city vehicles and sensors talk to this LTE tower, and it's private. You have 100% use of all the bandwidth. So that's interesting that they'll come in and install a private LTE network. They have the ability to do that.
One last thing. He reminded me of a video we watched of Bjorn on a road trip where he was on a winter, it was winter time. He was on a highway in Norway, and as he went down the highway, the lights came on as he went down the highway. So this guy says that it's really great that we've gone to LED street lights. I'm going to say because they don't shine up into the sky and light pollute as much, but obviously because they're saving cities lots of money on electricity. But he said 98% of the LED lights are still not smart lights. Yeah. And Don was talking about, like, if a bullet goes off, turn them all on bright, pan the shots. Well, he was basically saying that we really need these LED street lights to all be smart, so we can turn them off or dim them if no one is on that stretch of road. And then, as Bjorn showed, as cars come down the road, then they come on. They kind of, that day in that video, they sort of followed Bjorn down the road. It was really a cool kind of thing to watch. But they could be used in emergency situations and, you know, other things to be, you know, done with them. So also, as far as, I guess, what time they come on and go off, it's not just a photovoltaic cell, but can be done sort of on the cloud and, you know, other things out there too. So he was a proponent of making the LED street lights also be smart LED street lights. Yeah,
it's the street lights are a very good place to put sensors or cameras for a city. In other words, they're already deployed, they have power, they've got good visibility to the surrounding area. And so they make a very good place for a city to start doing some smart things. And as the gentleman from Cary said, apparently, though, not all cities own or have control of their street lights. That belongs to the utility or some other entity. But I can see that being something that's going to change. I remember there was a big battle whenever, in the early 90s, when internet connectivity, these cable companies, you know, your local cable TV company, you know, it had a contract with the city to do video services, cable TV. That's what it was. That's what those cables were wired for. And then all of a sudden, digital cable came out and allowed for home internet service. And a lot of the cities, they got very upset about that. They didn't get a cut of that wire. Now it's the same wire that was there last week, but now it's got another revenue source. And a lot of the cities did not get a cut of that. And so when it was renegotiated, normally those video contracts or cable contracts are like 20-year or 30-year contracts, and a lot of those are now coming up for renegotiation. So I suspect the street lights are similar, that after a period of time they get renegotiated.
So the last time Don went to one of these J government meetings, he got to listen to Missy Cummings from the Duke Autonomous Driving Robot AI Lab. And one of her students was here to talk to us today, Victoria. And this was the last presentation. She did a presentation on the possibility of using single person, or I'm going to say 3 to 4 person airplanes that would be autonomous flying around the city. She's done all of her PhD work in transportation, some stuff with trains. What was the middle one? There was buses were on the right, trains was on the left, airplanes was in the middle of her slide. So she's has a degree in applied mathematics, and then of course this PhD work in transportation fields. But yeah, it was really interesting. It was sort of a Jetsons futuristic look at the possibility of using autonomous airplanes as part of a city's transportation needs or plans.
Yeah, specifically she talked about the fact that there's 2 parts to those types of services, be it a drone or a autonomous
an operator
taxi, or a passenger airliner, or a train. There's, in the case of a train, there's a conductor and an engineer, but that's only half the team. That's the people physically operating, but they're really only doing half the job or less than that. The control center is the one that's directing the train, telling it when to go, how fast to go, all those types of things. The same thing with the airline. The pilot is talking to the FAA tower from a safety point of view, but where that plane's going, how much fuel it has on board, all those parts are all handled by a control center somewhere else. It has nothing to do with, well, it does have to do with safety, but its primary mission is to run the business, or to make that plane deliver what they need it to deliver safely. And that concept is what's going to be required by these autonomous flying vehicles, that there will have to be the actual drone will be autonomous. It'll fly, it'll know how high and all that stuff, but where it's going to go and who it's going to pick up and all those types of things is going to be done by some type of control center AI. And her area and field of study was how that control center plus the actual either people and or the autonomous vehicle, what the interaction is and how much of that you're going to need, and how you're going to how that whole solution is going to work in the future in this potentially highly automated, highly autonomous, but still needs to be controlled, and is actually trying to solve something, to be it ambulance service or fire service or taxi service.
Yeah, and I guess she saw it as not being something to be utilized by rich, wealthy people, but possibly one legitimate use of it would be for emergency personnel that need a life flight, so that the people that are on the vehicle are all the people that are taking care of the patient, not the crew that's responsible for the transport.
Yeah.
She talked about a life flight that had gone down and everyone died on the life flight. And
I had asked the question. I said, look, I don't quite get it. I mean, we all want to be in the Jetsons, but you know, how many of these autonomous vehicles would a city like Raleigh have? 5, 10? And I mean, is it only going to be for, how is that going to help solve the mobility needs of the citizens? The fact that 5 or 10 super wealthy people get to ride to the airport in this thing, or ride from their office in downtown to their mansion out in the suburbs, you know, that's nothing. I mean, that's of no practical value. If I was a city, I wouldn't be wasting my time $1 on that. But she pointed out that well, it's the emergency, the ambulance. It could literally fly to the first responder could push a button and a drone would show up. They'd load you into that drone and it would fly you quickly to the hospital. Obviously you could do that with a helicopter now, but you have to have a helicopter and a pilot, and it has to be ready to go where the drone might be battery powered or whatever. I saw her point that's the kind of thing that a city may want to invest in, is this emergency type situation. So flying vehicles from a city emergency first responder point of view, it has some merit, has legitimate merit, but I don't know. I don't see it from a transportation view. I mean, I'm never going to get to fly on I'm going to be too cheap. I'm not going to pay you $500 to take me from Fuquay to the airport.
I think they also saw there's an Amazon Prime local daily delivery truck over there.
Yeah.
Also some tourist type uses, like I don't know, at the Grand Canyon now today you rent a helicopter ride, it takes you out. Well, now you run a business where you have these autonomous 2 to 4 person aircraft, and you pay your $200 fee because they're going out once an hour, so the price comes down because it's getting utilized throughout most of the day. And you go out and you view the canyon, and you can tell it, oh, I want to go over here or hover here while I take this video or this picture. So I could see some touristy type information, but then they still need the software in the back end to manage them so they don't run into each other. And what exactly is that? Yeah, she showed Vahana, Aurora, and Lilium as 3 different prototypes or companies that were working on, had their own little versions of this plane. And so it's not just how to manage like one brand of these autonomous planes, but all these different brands. It's kind of like managing all these different car companies out on the highway with their autonomous driving software, ramping up. It sort of was the same thing. So it was interesting. And we enjoyed it. We sure are glad that the J Council government, that those folks will let us come into those presentations and watch them. And I definitely think we enjoyed it and learned a few things in there today.
Yeah.
So the word Tesla, I think we heard it twice in there today. One was just a conversation with Victoria. She sat next to us, the person from the Duke Autonomous Lab, the student, a PhD candidate from there. And then the AT&T guy that talked about privacy and that, Tesla was using AT&T for communications with their cars. So there was not a lot of talk about autonomous vehicle driving today, and therefore there was not any real discussion about Tesla or any of the other companies that are working on driver and assistance software. But it did come up just briefly. We've been home for about an hour, went in the house, got a quick snack, and took a really quick nap. And now it's time to go get Johnny, and I've got to stop over at Whole Foods and pick up the farm order and some groceries. So it's time to get back on the road. They're putting in more permanent street light posts here near the Walmart. Johnny and I have made it to Whole Foods, and we are splitting a pint of gelato. He has salted caramel and I have espresso. This piggy turned unicorn. I like it. It's cute. It started raining. Ruby and I traveled 118.7 miles today with a little help of Dawn and that trek over to RTP this morning. Well, the guys helped me get everything in from the car, and we got Ruby tucked into the garage, although she's just dripping water all over poor Dawn's floor. And the temps are dropping slow, but they are pretty much saying now that this is all gonna dry up before the cold air gets here. Well, that would be good because we don't need black ice problems tomorrow morning.